The Wizard of Part 2. The Vortex. TR awoke in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, to the distant sound of thunder and the staccato flash of lightning over the ocean, racing like a rocket ship across the eastern horizon. They had been listening to one of their favorite bands, Arcade Fire, on their iPhone with their pink-toned Bose wireless headphones, shortly before falling asleep. Dewey was still curled up in a cuddly tight ball next to them in the down purple sleeping bag that rested on the darkened beach where they had set up camp for the night, near enough to the high tide line to stay dry, but close enough to listen to the rhythmic sound of waves lapping like a lullaby against the distant shore. TR had been dreaming vividly when the approaching storm tore them abruptly from the world of sleep back to reality. Blearily, they checked their iPhone to see if a storm had been forecast on their weather app for that day. It was 1:17 in the morning, and the forecast was for clear blue skies and mild springtime temperatures. No storm was predicted, and nothing threatening appeared on their Doppler radar app either. "We are living in strange times," TR mused softly under their breath so as not to disturb the sleeping feline at their feet. TR gingerly extracted themselves from the sleeping bag and slowly began to walk the beach, unable, or perhaps unwilling, to fall back to sleep. In their head, TR saw the last fading traces of the dream they had had that night. And here is what TR saw. 7 red cardinals were noisily gathered around the corpse of a freshly killed lamb. It lay on an emerald green pasture surrounded by rocky gray mountains capped with shimmering white snow. It was raining lightly, but the noonday midsummer sun shone bright through the clouds. An enormous iridescent rainbow arced across the sky. The birds were greedily pecking at the entrails of the dead lamb, which looked to have been ravaged by wolves. The lamb's bright red blood soaked to the grasses and wildflowers of the forest meadow, and its throat had been torn so savagely that its spinal cord was exposed, and the lamb's skull was cracked to reveal the gray and pink contents of its brain. TR watched as one of the cardinals greedily grabbed an eyeball and began gorging itself on the mineral-rich contents. Not to be outdone, a second cardinal jealously pecked at the first until it dropped the eye and flew away in anger. A third cardinal, one far larger than all the rest, lured it over the scene from a distant treetop, staring down with a fixed and imperious gaze. A fourth cardinal was preening its feathers from a lower branch and seemed completely uninterested in the feast set out on the field below. Another cardinal, a fifth, looked to be sleeping lazily in a nest encased in the hull of a willow tree at the edge of the field, while another set of birds were engaged in a mating ritual of some sort. TR, who was an avid birdwatcher in their waking life, had seen plenty of cardinals in Pantano Place. This mating dancerevo was nothing like the ones they had observed through their binoculars in the forest. One cardinal, number 6, in TR's dream, was aggressively thrusting itself forcefully on top of the other and trying to pin it down. The 7th cardinal responded angrily to these unwanted overtures, calling out loudly in a harsh, shrill voice that sounded positively wrathful to TR's sensitive ears. TR turned away from this disturbing scene and wandered into the lush green pine forest that bordered the meadow. There, they encountered a group of 7 intelligent-looking blue jays. The first jay industriously gathered seeds and nuts from the forest floor. The bird then carefully placed the seeds and nuts into a small pile at the base of a stately fir tree, whose branches extended upward far into the sky. A second jay was helping itself to the shared food supply and appeared to be making gentle, cooing calls of gratitude to the first. A third jay was feeding small bits of foraged food to a baby bluebird in a feather-lined nest who waited patiently for the next nourishing bite. Another jay, the 5th by TR's count, was delicately nibbling at a delicious-looking patch of wild blueberries growing at the edge of the pines. The berries shone in the sun like sumptuous tiny round sapphires. A sixth jay was preening its mate, nuzzling a sharp beak into the wing feathers of the other, like a welcome massage. The seventh jay was the most stately and beautiful looking of the flock, but there was something about its regal bearing that struck TR as neither pompous nor petty. TR sat down on the mossy forest floor and collected pine nuts from fallen cones with the help of a small serrated pocket knife. They placed 7 pine nuts in a circle in front of them and waited patiently until the jays, who are quite curious and bold by nature, approached them one by one to collect a seed each. When the birds had finished, they looked intently into TR's indigo eyes and cooed out a complex series of rising and falling tones that were entrancing for TR to hear. TR was startled from their dreamlike revelry by an enormous flash of hot white lightning that touched down on the dark ocean waters with a steamy sizzle. It was followed by a thunderclap so loud and resonant that it set TR's ears ringing. They reached into their backpack and hastily put on noise-canceling headphones to shield their ears from the high-decibel sounds of thunder that were now rolling in from all sides. Dozens, then hundreds of lightning flashes illuminated the night sky as a strong wind began to rise from the east. Without warning, the wind rose to a fierce intensity such that the sands of the beach swirled around TR's naked feet, twisting and turning like a serpent. TR wasn't frightened easily, but this storm was unlike anything they had encountered before. Is this all real, or am I still dreaming? They wondered aloud. TR glanced anxiously at their iPhone. Their Twitter app showed 6 new alerts, which most definitely had not been the case when they had gone to sleep several hours earlier. Their Instagram app also showed 6 alerts, as did their TikTok app. How strange, TR thought to themselves. But TR wasn't superstitious. They were too level-headed for that. Still, the weather had left them unsettled. Moving swiftly with experienced ease, TR packed up the contents of their campsite and gently roused Dewey the cat awake. Hey, sleepyhead! There's a storm coming. Let's seek higher ground. Let's find some shelter so we don't get wet. Begrudgingly, Dewey gave his assent and emerged from the warm down sleeping bag. TR stowed the bag quickly in its purple stuff sack and placed it in the backpack. Then, they dragged the kayak as far into the forest as they could and found a tall, ancient-looking oak tree where the two of them could rest, safely against its thick, gnarled trunk. The forest was scattered all about with dry leaves and looked incredibly parched for moisture. TR knew that Pantano Place was enduring an extended drought and the landscape had been starved of precipitation for months. TR hoped that the storm would bring needed rain. As the lightning storm moved in rapidly from the ocean onto the shore, however, not a single drop of rain fell. Instead, only repeated lightning strikes and peals of thunder rumbled through the forest, while a fierce wind broke branches and limbs and even toppled several tall trees, dangerously near to the ancient oak, where TR and Dewey had sought a hasty sanctuary. The lightning ignited several fires in the desiccated underbrush, which the swirling winds spread at a breakneck pace. Soon, TR and Dewey were encircled by a towering ring of fire. TR and Dewey knelt down in utter terror and clung to each other in a tight ball, hoping and praying that God would spare their young lives from the maelstrom of destruction surrounding them. "Father, protect us!" TR called out at the top of their voice. Why they did so, they could not say. It was instinctual, an emotional cry for help in the face of utter desperation. At that moment, the winds suddenly rose to a fevery pitch and engulfed the flaming forest in an incandescent vortex of pure and unstoppable fiery power. TR, Dewey, and all of their camping gear, along with quite a few fragments of the forest, it must be said, were borne skyward on a wall of upward spiraling wind. With ferocious devotion and steely determination, TR clung tightly to Dewey. They buried the cat in the folds of their Gore-Tex jacket. Dewey, for his part, seemed unfazed by all the racket. He was one cool cat, it must be said. Nothing scared Dewey. TR was about to say something to Dewey as they soared ever higher into the funnel cloud of flame and the tornado that bore them at breakneck speed far from their familiar surroundings. They were about to, it must be said, but an oak branch, caught up in the wind, struck TR so forcibly on the side of their head that they lost consciousness entirely. And so, without warning, TR's world suddenly faded, completely and entirely black. Hidden within the folds of TR's sturdy jacket, Dewey, however, remained safe. He extended his claws gently and lovingly into the woolen hoodie that TR so often wore while adventuring. "Don't worry, my human friend," Dewey said to himself. "Everything will be fine. Hold on. Hold on. Even in the midst of chaos, may your mind be at peace. I am by your side. We can make it if we try. Don't quit on me, because I'll never quit or abandon you ever." And with that, Dewey closed his emerald green feline eyes and promptly fell asleep. The end of part 2.